Hi, my name's Dee, and welcome to Sunchild Tarot, and welcome again to Astrologer David Fischer. How are you doing, David?
Hey Dee, I'm good. Nice to be here again. Are you?
I'm good, thanks. Well, I'm full of cold, so if you see me wiping my nose, I do apologise. I've just reached the end of it. So this is a very special full moon analysis. So full moon in Gemini, 27 degrees Gemini, and this is the first specifically designed show, not just for YouTube, but we are joining Odyssey and we are joining BitChute. And if I actually pull my finger out, we're also joining Vimeo, but let's see how the day goes so far. So I was very excited about this full moon when I first started looking at it. And the deeper I've gone to look at it, the more, well, I think it's going to be quite dramatic, have some dramatic effects. Now, just for the audience information, David and I are trying to do this show differently. We have not discussed anything. So we are going to, we're going is this completely blind about what the other person's going to bring up. So let's see how this goes.
Yeah, this should be fun.
Yeah. So
okay.
What do you think? So, good, bad, dramatic?
Really good in general. I like this full moon, especially because it's the first. Can you enable screen share?
My apologies.
Especially because it's the first, lunation in Gemini and Sag that we're going to have in a while that doesn't, is not an eclipse. So this in itself is already really different from everything we've experienced since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, there was this last eclipse in Capricorn, I think, by 4 degrees. It was a solar eclipse of Capricorn. It had Jupiter here, right where Mercury's standing right now in this particular lunation. So since that time, we haven't had much peace in these areas of our chart, and now it's like we are being able to give words to completely see the picture of what happened in the last couple of years in our lives in order to move forward. This is a very positive new moon, full moon in general. Because you also have this trine to Jupiter. So it's a benefic planet giving its help, its support to that particular configuration. And you have Venus being stationary, which means you have the other benefic being very prominent in the sky, kind of telling us to look at its significations in our lives and the way that planet in particular manifests in our charts. And how those significations are being reconfigured right now, because the effect that a planet in station has in our lives is as if you have a unicorn standing in the center of a room and you have to address it. There is no way you can just keep going with your life without looking at, wait a minute, what's that in the middle of the room that we cannot identify? And that's the process of the retrograde starting. Something is revealed, it comes to light in a very shiny way, and then it kind of disappears. That's the effect of the planet in the sky when it's stationing retrograde in the case of Venus and Mercury. They disappear under the beams of the sun after stationing retrograde and turning retrograde. And so it is that thing that you have to have the experience with, the sensorial, I think, experience with it. And once you have those experiences, you can then redefine the path that you are following. So yeah, this is the general outline. You have the benefic planets screaming in the sky in this lunation. You have the Sagittarius, which is a sign ruled by Jupiter, also being very prominent, being where the Sun and Mars are. So very action-oriented piece of our charts right now. We're going to talk about that as well. And Saturn is ruling 3 other planets and itself in its own home. So all these aspects, they are going to factor in to the general feel of the lunation.
Okay.
Now, what do you think we could cover first? What attracts your attention the most?
Well, I'm going to say that I agree with you about things being highlighted and the chance to reflect, because I would not be a proper card-carrying hippie if I did not mention the fact that the sun is on the galactic center. So I did a little bit of thinking about this. And if you're thinking about, there's this philosophy that information energy is beamed out from the galactic center to us. The sun is picking it up. It's picking it up in our identity, but that's where everything is coming from. So where the moon is heading, where the moon is right now is it's almost a Star Trek direction. It gives us where we're boldly going, but it's a full moon. It's reflecting the light back. So again, it's giving us that pause to think, that pause to just have a look at everything that's going on. So I see what you're saying about that point of revelation that you were drawing from Venus stationing. But there's that T-square with Neptune. And that is something where just because we're seeing something, I'm rather worried that we're not necessarily going to interpret it correctly. And I don't mean just in terms of the chart, I mean in terms of events that we see in our own life, because we can see something happen and believe that its causes or its effects are something different to what they actually are. Now, I want to go into this later as well, because let's not do the asteroids yet, but there's a lot of asteroids that are encouraging this idea of being misled, trying too much, acting inappropriately is not the right word, but acting in the wrong direction or being
perhaps inadvertently.
Yes. Doing something in reaction to a stimuli where you've misinterpreted the stimuli, therefore your action is incorrect and not necessarily constructive.
I'd like to interject because I agree with you in part, but I think that the results of that are going to be a little more positive. And I say that because we've been here before. I think the kind of mist or the kind of deceivingness or deceiving energy that's in the air about Neptune here, I think we have experienced it before. And I think that if we do have that kind of experience where we are moved by uninformed action, uninformed impulses, that's going to be to show us where we have done the same before and to kind of redirect our actions, to make us realize why we fell into the same trap in the first time and why we're following it again, but before we actually go over the cliff,
I hope you're right.
I think that's it. And I'm going to give all the reasons for that because this is a full moon ruled by Mercury. Mercury is in the same spot again, as I said previously, as Jupiter and the South Node both were when you had this eclipse in Capricorn at 4 degrees. The moon was applying to Jupiter within 4 degrees in that eclipse and the South Node. So since then, I feel like we had these events happening to our Jupiter, and Jupiter, we all know, following the path of Jupiter through the past 2 years, how Jupiter has been involved with the coronavirus, combative effort, and how we've dealt with the pandemic. While it was in Capricorn, it was just chaos. We didn't know how to deal with anything. Then it got into Aquarius, we got the vaccines, but now we have to restructure everything so we can, again, have something in the long term that is more sustainable. Is building up the structure, Saturn, Aquarius, the social structure that will allow us to have a functional society, which is Jupiter, the support, building up the support and harnessing the support to move forward with society. Now, with Jupiter about to move into its own sign and ruling the Sun and Mars, I feel like we are acting in our perceived reality. We are chasing those modes of supporting our dreams and our impulses in the way that we saw fit, in the way that our Mercury's, the pattern that we have identified, or the path that we have identified would be the best one to follow. The circuit that would be the best one to follow for achieving a determined goal. And of course, this is all experimental because we are in the beginning of that cycle of Saturn and Jupiter. So it's like we are socially adapting to this new environment, right? And it's still too soon to say where we're headed and what the impacts are of everything we've been through. However, it's not too soon for us to say, remember, all the past lunation videos that we made, I said that we are in this arduous, long process of adaptation to this new social environment. And do not take this lightly. This is what Saturn represents, long-term processes that take decades to really integrate into one person's life. And sometimes they die in the middle of that process. Sometimes it's not a continuous process for everyone. It's something that they're not meant to get to the end of. And so do not think of these astrological transits as something that will take you somewhere. This is the general feel of it. And you should take the best in order to be more conscious and to be able to deal with it in the most conscious way possible in order to for you to be more comfortable dealing with these situations. Now, in the present. So in this case, you see Jupiter by the end of a sign about to go into its home. You see the sun in the galactic center wrapping up its journey through Sagittarius. You see the moon by the end of Gemini as well, kind of telling us, right, I've made up the plans, I've made up the how-to, and the how-to is being shown to me right now as something that I can trust, something that I can follow through with. Why? Again, because Mercury is in a very good position. It's going to come out of the race pretty soon, still direct and fast in an Earth sign. So it's going to be willing to bring things to form. You know, it's going to be directed towards materializing things. Venus also is focused on that, and it's doing so by telling us what's not attractive to us anymore. We are not dancing around things being like, oh, this used to be what I wanted. I'm so confused. I don't know where to go anymore. No, we've reached this point at the station where we don't say anymore, I don't know where I want to go. We just say, I know I don't want to stay anymore where I am because it's not agreeing with me, you know?
That's the point that I've been focusing on. Because
take over now. That was my...
I'm agreeing with everything that you're saying, but to get to that stage, first you have to overcome the anger of the disappointment. And there is a lot of anger in this chart that I can see. There is Black Moon Lilith. The moon is parallel Lilith. So that's equivalent to a conjunction. So there's, you know, obviously Lilith is stimulating the feelings. It's Lilith's 12th part is in direct opposition to the moon. So there's that sort of to and fro-ness going on. And they're both ruled by the same angel, Hakamia. Let's just check if I've got some notes. I may have to come back about Hakamia. But there's a lot of power with that. It's also, Jupiter is tredecile Lilith. Now, Jupiter makes things bigger. The tredecile is the sacred number of 108. It's the partner to the quintile on, you know, from 180 degrees. And let's see, let me just grab my notes because I'm falling over my own tongue here. So the tredecile represents almost like the quintessence coming to act, that perfect moment of timing, that arrival of that perfect thing. Now, with this being Jupiter and Lilith, I'm not saying that this anger is a bad thing, but I am saying it's definitely there. I think that there's a lot at the moment that people would be right to be angry about, but they've got to, everyone, myself included, we've all got to be so careful about where we are aiming that anger. People are protesting against the lockdowns and the masks when there's a killer virus going around still. Numbers are going up in Europe. Numbers are certainly going up here in Britain. but they're not necessarily being angry about the way corporations are screwing us over, and there's still the old weird power dynamics. It's, you know, focus on what is the important things. The virus is here, but it will pass. Corporations won't pass unless we make them, you know. So that there's that whole, and I'm pro-vaccine, I'm pro-wearing masks, but even I can see that there are power grabs that are going on and civil liberties are being eroded. And that I find very, very worrying and really hard to figure out, well, how do I act against this when 1 minute I'm beating the drum for the vaccine and beating the drum for masks in public spaces and enclosed spaces, but at the same time, you can see all these different civil liberties getting eroded away. So those are angers that will come to the surface within this. If I go back to Hakamiya, let's just see what Hakamiya is about. It's about the power to stop traitors. Oh, yeah, and I've written it down on my piece of paper here. It's about the power to stop traitors. When you work closely with other people, there is the potential for betrayal, which can occur within an organization, group of friends, within business. It's the power, Hakamiya is the power to stop oppressors. If someone is holding you back or oppressing your ability to express the life you want to lead. Now, that very statement, in the way that the political situation of anywhere in the world that you care to look at right now, whether it's people being oppressed by the Taliban, or being oppressed or feeling oppressed by the coronavirus measures, or being oppressed by stay in your homes and Netflix and chill because that's all you're getting. You know, there's so much there that I think these angers are going to rise to the surface. Good, they need to, about time. But with that T-square to Neptune, it's it makes me think of the old divide and conquer trick, where there are, in fact, weirdly, Russell Brand did a video about this yesterday or the day before, where they're talking about how those in authority, be they corporations, be they Facebook algorithm, YouTube algorithm, or be they governments, they try to divide people so that you are blaming them, being your neighbor or the immigrant or the brown person or whatever, rather than those who are actually holding the reins of power. And so I'm getting a bit passionate, my cold's coming out.
Yeah, no,
but
you're right.
It's so easy to aim your anger at the them, the other that has been othered in front of you, rather than, hang on a minute, it's this power system that's messing everything up. I rest my case for a minute. I need to cough.
No, you're completely right. And that's the Saturn dynamic, Saturn and Jupiter dynamic here, because Jupiter makes everything bigger, as you were saying. And in the past couple of years, we've seen that the social unawareness about what really goes on behind the scenes was one of the directly responsible factors that made the pandemic worse. And that just showed the flagrant carelessness of these oligarchies in our society, you know, oligarchies, I'm not sure how you guys say it.
Oligarchies.
But yeah, you have that shown to us, not because they said it directly, but because they are outing so many people, they are outcasting so many people now, and so many people are going back into under the poverty line, that it became clear that there was never a structure that was meant for them. Even though they are saying, oh, it's about all of us, it's about society, it became clearer and clearer that it's just about the ones who have money. And from time to time, we are made aware of that reality in order to re-establish some, social order. But under the air age, where the Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions happen, and under the air triplicity signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius more recently, for the next 200 years or so, you're going to have this being developed. That's why I said it's not always in one person's lifetime. We are going to see the way corporations are understood in our society, much like the power dynamics with the church back in the 1200s was reshaped, or the 1300s rather, was reshaped, you know, in the last Star Age. The way that the church held power over Europe started changing back then, when you had the schism between the popes. You had two popes, and you had church and state fighting and all of that. It's kind of that now. You're going to see the schism between the government and the way we rule our countries and corporations and capitalism being dismantled by its unsustainability.
I think that's going to be a fierce battle, because it's interesting that you pick on the business. Because one of the angels who's very prominent in this chart is, if I can pronounce it correctly, Anauel. Now, Anauel is about appreciation, about a perception of unity, protects against accidents, but also protects commerce, bankers, and commission brokers, which is really interesting because we've got this power on both sides. Now, if you look at the text from the Angels of Power by Damon Brand, the powers of Emmanuel is all about protecting your business. So we can all access this energy of Anauel, but to show how strong Anauel is in the chart, Saturn is in Anauel's arc. It's quinance, it's 5-degree arc. Anauel rules the degree of Mercury and Neptune and the 12th part of Jupiter and the 12th part of the North Node. So, you know, it's definitely there in the middle of the chart, waving, you know, saying, here's a way forward, which is what I'm getting with that 12th part North Node. North Node, some people interpret as a destiny, and 12th part is an intention or where things will tend to in the future. So there's, with that energy, it's either the corporations can slowly reveal that they control the world anyway, or that fight for independence and that fight for changing the system is coming from small business. And when all said and done, there is energy here for people to make businesses, and small businesses especially, survive if you access it. It's so it's Anauel.
Absolutely.
If you want to light a candle on this full moon to Anauel, I highly recommend doing that if you are a small business owner or you have some form of business project, because there is so much energy in the sky that you can actually use this. I mean, what thing that I wrote down from that Jupiter Tridactyl Lilith is uprising, or the fact that people's shadows are rising. Those shadows are from wounds, whether they're from years ago or just the events of the last few months. It's a really good, speaking of lighting a candle, it's a really good moon for doing your hocus pocus, doing your rituals, doing a ritual for manifesting something, as long as you know you are directing it to the right end, because there's so much distraction out there. Again, T-square with Neptune. But there's a number of asteroids in various places, like I say, I'll get onto them later, that are magically powerful but deceptive.
Yes, I would like to talk a little bit more about that deception bit, because I still think that even though that element is there, the results are going to be more positive. We have Jupiter direct, we have Neptune direct in ground that it's already covered. Which means we are probably reshaping the way of understanding those misunderstandings. You know, we are seeing where we went wrong in the past, and we are trying to assert a new way of understanding it. We are trying to give new words for these things that were confusing already during the last year, and we are perhaps trying not to repeat those same patterns again. Now, the deceptive quality is still there. And it could be for some people very well that denial about the larger reality, about the social dynamic that they find themselves in. They keep blaming themselves, for instance, for their failures and not understanding how they are making an effort, but their effort is not compensated because we have social disparities and not because they are not doing enough or because they are not appropriate for something. We have that problem we have to solve as a society. And I think that Pisces also speaks to that. The things that we need to love each other enough to be able to see socially, you know, and it's very difficult to detach yourself from that vision of, oh, it's my fault, enough that you can see the larger perspective and see where you have been going wrong, you know. So yes, I agree with the larger perspective being deceptive in a few ways because you're not aware of certain circumstances, but I do think that we've been through this before with this particular full moon. And I think this is, especially because it's in Gemini, which is the sign of taking things at face value. You give something a name and you expect it to follow a certain pattern related to that name that you gave to it. And you use it as a use object. You don't think about the experience with it. You don't try to wrap your mind around it. You just take the hammer, for instance, and you ham the nail, you know? You don't try to make that hammer as pretty as possible. You don't try, because those are not its functions. This is Gemini. This is made for that, and that's what I'm using it for. And so the sun wrapping up in the galactic center, its journey, again, always in the galactic center, through Sagittarius going into the solstice, we do see this hinge moment where we are made acutely aware of this larger reality that we've been through before, but now we are kind of seeing why things happened the way they did more clearly, and we are able to finally let go of that previous dynamic. Not that we are going to have all the pieces 100% right, we are just making the effort to be able to call things for what they are and use them without being so anxious if the results are going to come out as you wish. You're going to be certain as you act that the results are going to be the ones you expect in this particular full moon, even though Neptune is there and there is that element of I'm not quite sure and I'm afraid things will happen the way they did again. It's that trying to avoid them from happening the way they did again that drives you towards that. I also say that because of the Venus-Mars conjunction here. It's trying to separate yourself from things that, you know, are not desirable anymore. It's just like Venus is screaming, being like, I need to be fed, I need to be listened to, I need to be heard, you know, listen to me. It's not see me, it's not look at me, it's listen to me.
Yes, there's a oh, I've got so much to add to that. There's Venus is starting all of this off, most definitely. When I looked at Lilith in isolation and everything that was going on with Lilith, I was writing, well, you know, it looks like what's that musical line? I predict a riot. You know, there's everyone feels justified in their anger, everyone being the hero in their own story. But the planets are saying it is time. That Jupiter tredicile Lilith, as I said, that the Jupiter making that anger and that those shadows come to the surface, with it being a tredicile, is the perfect moment for it to happen. Venus is, there's an astrologer called John Sandbach has has things called seed degrees and fulfillment degrees. Now, the fulfillment degree of where Venus is, i.e. where this result is going to come into being, where we can expect it, is the 12th part of Lilith in this chart. So again, Venus is starting that thing off. And there's also the Venus stationary and Chiron stationary, and Uranus by the arc that it's in, 5-degree arc, are all ruled by Haziel. Now, Haziel is about divine mercy and forgiveness. So there's this hint about these angers come up and they might actually get resolved because there's that issue of forgiveness, plus there's a matter of justice. because where the moon is in the decan of the daimon Praxidike, who is a goddess of justice. There was another justice thing going on. Well, we've had that Hakamiya ruling the moon and stopping traitors. We have, there was nothing, but what's interesting as well in all of this is I think there's a rock bottom that this moon brings. If you look at the Sabian symbol for 27 Gemini, it's all about bankruptcy. It's all about there being nothing left. And so working out how to, through bankruptcy, society gives to an overburdened individual the opportunity to begin again. That's quite an interesting symbol against all of this backdrop.
Yes, definitely. It does feel like what's going on, because you have that Venus stationary retrograde in Capricorn, Mercury in Capricorn, kind of, okay, I need to redo the way I deal with my resources. Capricorn is all about resources and the resources you have available to attend to your needs. That's opposite to Cancer. And being the sign of the detriment of the moon, many times you have to understand where you're lacking, understand where things are bothering you the most, to be able to prioritize which are the most important resources for you to harness, for you to gather right now. And I think that bankruptcy is a tool for that, is a tool for you to be able to ask for help because you don't have enough, you know, you're in a Capricorn state and you kind of have this legal tool that can help you reshape that state. And Venus is about that also, is about support, is about having friends that will help you out with that, is about having enough comfort. And with Venus retrograde in Capricorn are we really focusing on the resources, on gathering the resources, applying, investing resources on things that are long-term, that are producing long-term stability? Are we focusing on that? And I think that that's with Mars being in Antisha, that's something that we didn't mention before, with Mars being in Antisha, with that Venus and Venus being conjunct to Pluto, it does feel like you have to kind of separate, kind of accept the separation of things, kind of accept that even though you wish you could maintain something, even though you wish things would have been different, because Mars and Venus are in that particular encounter that's secretive, they don't see each other by natural aspect, but they have a connection unless they kind of see that by adopting this Venusian ritual of going towards what you want, you realize the Martian rhythm following it, being in the same kind of wavelength as Venus is right now, in a way. And there is no way of doing one of the rituals without executing the other as well at this moment. It's like that secretive conjunction that makes itself apparent when you try to access either of the energies of those planets. So if you do the Mars, meaning if you are aggressive, if you try to sever, if you try to assert your will in a way, you will see clearly where your desires in your heart truly lie. But if you try to do the Venusian ritual, meaning you're trying to reassess your desires, the things that you try to go for, the old desires that you already had, the things that you're used to, the things that are comfortable for you, and you realize that you need to break away because they are different from you. They are not like you. You see the connection with the word liking, yeah. Venus, like you, we like things that are alike, and yada, yada. And so that's the gist of an Antisha. You have those planets sometimes at odds, sometimes not even preceding each other by classical aspect, but if you do one, the other will come out unexpectedly. And as Dee was saying, you have to be careful with you have to be careful with that, because you might be, what were you saying about not being satisfied and being, you might feel frustrated. You might feel that you're deceiving yourself, and you might want to blame it on someone else. You might want to blame it on certain other circumstances. Just don't do that, and you should be fine. Just take responsibility for whatever actions you need to take right now, and leave whatever's weighing you down behind, because, it's not going to serve you, even if you wished it was different.
I have bits to add to that, because of course I do. You can tell I've had time to do my research this time. So the Venus-Pluto conjunction, which I want us to discuss in greater length, but we've seen that there's this, one of Pluto, I don't even know if I'm correct in saying this, but the impression I get from studying about Pluto, there's one keyword or phrase that you could use with Pluto is enough now. And so Venus and Pluto, Pluto is saying enough now to certain forms of comfort that certain people have enjoyed at the expense of others. Pluto is having a relationship with Lilith that Venus is starting to get into motion. Pluto is biquintile to Lilith, so there's creative energy coming out of that statement of enough now, tinged with anger, absolutely, but it's constructive anger, and they are counter parallel to one another. So there is it's an opposition, yes, but it's also that Pluto is saying put that anger in its place, because in any opposition with Pluto, as I recall, I think it was, oh God, I've forgotten her name, was on the Astrology podcast. Oh my God, curly hair, Australian and Canadian, and was in Belgium for a while. Kelly Surtees. I think it was Kelly that said, if there's an opposition with Pluto, Pluto wins. And so that there is an end point to this anger, but it's useful and it's constructive. It is based on the no more. That's what we could call this. So I've got about 15 different potential titles for this video at the moment. We'll have to discuss that at the end. But I mean, the full moon
the
of
broader
no
the
more?
sphere. Yeah, the broader the sphere of the planet, meaning these ellipses, these it's like they are concentric circles. I know that sometimes Pluto enters the orbit of Neptune, and that's not what I'm talking about. I know that they're not perfect, but it's like they are concentric circles. And ideally,
like the celestial spheres.
Sorry?
Like the celestial spheres.
Yes, it's exactly what I'm talking about. And naturally, you would end at Saturn because it's the last visible planet. But if you're talking about the outer planets as well, you include that in their view, in the way to view them as well, I would think. And Pluto is the outermost of all of these objects that we are considering in this particular reading. I know that there are more Kuiper belt objects that are eligible for being in the same level as Pluto, but he was discovered first, so that's arguable. And no, I'm joking. But it's still, you have that heavy weight of being an outermost planet, meaning that that planet is describing the outermost and slowest rhythms of the reality that we are inserted in. And so, of course, Pluto is going to win, because if you have Venus up against Pluto, you're talking about a personal planet that is completely derived of human capacity for thinking, logic, and love, and all these human traits in that sense, that are going up against perhaps forces of nature, forces of society that are caused by that human nature that takes billions or millions of years to develop in a different way. Millions, I should say, years to develop in a different way. So, yeah, of course it's not going to win. What we were talking about Neptune previously, that are larger social cycles as well that we are living through. I mean, Pluto and Neptune have been in a sextile forever now, like for decades, literally decades now. And these are several generations that are going to be impacted with that same signature from the time frame that they were born in. So yeah, that's why Pluto. Sorry, the digression. It was just
I want to focus
planetary spheres.
back for a moment on what you were saying about Pluto, or rather what I'm going to go all hippie woo woo here, but you know, clues in the name. It's the gods or the universe or the angels or spirit is jumping up and down saying, now, do it now. We have a sextile between Mercury and Jupiter, which will have, I would say, I've not got a lot to say about that apart from it's there. Again, showing the, on one level, you could say divinely guided economic activity may well increase. But that antitia between Venus and Mars is also a sextile, and they are also parallel with one another. So they are really working together, and Mars is ruling Venus's 12th part. So it's Mars, it is Pluto's there saying enough now, and Mars is almost going, finally we can move, finally we can get going. Yes. And then with Lilith encouraging everybody to go, damn right we can get moving, you know. I think that little period that is offering may be a bit stormy. I think we may see a hardening of divisions for a while, but like you were saying, from the Venus and Mars, if someone's depending on the comfort, they suddenly realize it doesn't fit anymore. If someone's being all aggressive, they suddenly find something that will soften them and encourage them to work with rather than against the other that I was discussing earlier. Actually, yes, I'm going back to feeling confident about this moon now.
Yes, it's a really good moon and powerful for fertility, but not in the sense that benefics are in the best position ever in Saturn signs to provide that resource that you would expect, but they do provide you with the best view of what not to do, of what the structure should be, of what you have to apply yourself in the long term to be able to acquire in order to put that, to move that forth, you know, to put that forward. Now, you have the Venus, Pluto also being, we are being given by Pluto this larger perspective, this way of accessing our Venusian capacities more deeply. And so what's going to happen when Venus is screaming at the sky, because she's the closest to Earth, every planet that's retrograde is in its closest position to Earth in its cycle. And so what is it doing right now by going into the underworld is showing us what we are attracted to. Saturn is also to do with kinks and with results of trauma. So if you have any trauma bonding problems, if you have any obsessive issues, with obsession within relationships specifically, be it, you know, you're very jealous of your friends, very possessive over your friends or over your relationship, significant other, whatever that is, the ways you relate to people, for example, if you are a hard monogamous, you might be confronted with the fact that you are actually very insecure and you find yourself to be a polyamorous kind of character, but you were insecure previously. Not that everybody's going to have that experience. It's just one of the examples that this could manifest as.
Wear a mask while you're doing it.
Yes, if you are an heterosexual male, for instance, and you're very normative, you're confronted suddenly with this obsession with showing people your masculinity, you're masculine, and that you are not gay at all. And you are confronted over and over again with people asking you, "Are you mad? Why are you so mad?" It was just a question, you know? Or a gay person comes up to you and hits on you and you're just distraught by the situation. And then you're confronted with those particular deep feelings, deep-rooted feelings that give you a more ready access to your depths that you don't usually have consciously. And that will have to do with Venusian things. That's why I'm mentioning relationships, sexuality, friendships. These are going to be the areas that are going to rise those problems.
I have something to support that as well. As much as I was saying, going back to the gods are screaming, with that Jupiter tredocile Lilith, it's also a novile Chiron. So a noble aspect, 40 degrees, I think it's a Uranian aspect, indicates an energy of perfection and or enacting an ideal. Now we're talking about Chiron. We're talking about Jupiter that makes things bigger and Chiron, the wounded teacher. So the wound may get bigger, it becomes more obvious, and all that Lilith activity kicks in. Or we may be possibly able to tap into that teaching aspect and receive teachings of how to not let that wound control and how to...
I think it's both.
Move on. Yeah,
I think it ties back to what we were saying about Neptune and being aware of how you were wounded in the past because of your own false expectations, where those false expectations came from, where you got the face value part wrong, and you took things for one particular use and they gave you another twist. And by Chiron stationing direct now, I think that we are going to tend to look at the healing side of it, with a teaching side of it, you know, because Venus stationing retrograde, which means we are able to look at our desires in a new under a new light, but that only initiates the process of going under the beams and into the underworld, where we then have that empirical experience to really come out on the other side as the Venus Urania, the more Uranian kind of Venus, isn't that right? Venus Urana, is that how they call it?
Urania, yeah.
Urania.
Urania.
And yeah, I think that would be the morning Venus, not sure, but the morning side of Venus, the morning star side of Venus, is the more fearless, where you have actual experience and not just, you know, being receptive to this stimuli around you and being able to respond to that stimuli. It's the more active Venus that goes for what it needs and explores its different capacities in order to achieve that stability. So we are going to have a more practical approach to Venusian matters in the next couple of months. And also Mars going into Capricorn and being co-present with that now direct Venus once it turns direct. They're going to hold hands. They're going to be at the partel conjunct for a long period of time. Yeah. Very long, way into Aquarius even. They're going to be talking to each other, merging with each other, and bringing a completely different scenario in our life, because Venus and Mars together for that long is not that usual, and it's an incredibly powerful force that we don't have that often in the sky, let alone in this particular way, like where they walk hand in hand together for so long.
Almost as if Pluto had turned around and told them, look, you two work together for a change.
Yeah, you two need to reassess, because they are the responsible couple for bringing change and stability into the realm of becoming, let's put it like that, in a Platonic sense. In this reality that we are inserted in, where things are constantly changing and coming to be and passing away, Venus and Mars, they have kind of a part of, in consciousness, of showing us through our senses what's like us and what's unlike us, so we can bring into our awareness the things that need to be incorporated into this new mode of being, Venus, and the things that need to be left out, Mars, from this old mode of being that doesn't serve you anymore as any purpose in the present.
I think we've got a lot of people, us included, no doubt, are going to be quite surprised about what feelings rise up as well. Because like we say, we've got Lilith stirring everything up. But one thing I noticed is it's almost exact. It's exact to the degree. It's almost exact to the minute, if I remember correctly. Moon by quintile Pandora. We're going to be surprised by what our feelings unleash. Or what feelings are unleashed is probably a better way to put it. Or what is revealed by those feelings getting unleashed and getting put into motion. But there's
definitely, this depends on what's being hit in your particular chart by it, but definitely that's going to be a general feeling.
Yeah, it could be about home, it could be about money, it could be about service, it could be about any of the house topics. And
You
good
have
luck.
to narrow it down.
Yeah, good luck anybody who's got it going on in the 12th house. But there's the moon is very much supported. I had a look. I was thinking about, if you've watched the past few of our videos, then you know I've got increasingly more and more fascinated with the septile. I'd already liked it, but certainly Rick Levine appearing on the astrology podcast has given me an even bigger interest in the septile. So I've had a look at what asteroids are septile to all the different bodies. And the moon has got some very nice septiles to it. Biseptile with Hera and Pallas, and triseptile to Minerva. There's 2 wisdom and 1 sticking to your agreements and making sure things are fair goddesses there. There is an element of punishment there where appropriate, because we have, well, Hera wasn't always painted as, she could be a bit jealous and would take action when she felt she needed to. And also there's a triseptile from the moon to Terpsichore, one of the Furies, and Terpsichore actually appears a few times in the septiles. But the downside is we have Circe, quintile the moon, triseptile the sun. So yes, there's that wonderful, there's an aspect there, wonderful for accessing the hocus pocus, doing your candle rituals, setting your magical intentions. Put your crystals out, remember, because it's galactic center and all that. But Circe was not always the most legit and pure-hearted individual, so be careful about what you turn into and what you're turning things into, because again, that leads us back to that whole idea of the T-square with Neptune. But the one thing I like about the T-square with Neptune is about dissolving boundaries. Now, as a T-square, there will be a resistance to that dissolving boundaries, but that's in a way good, because it means as these boundaries are dissolving, you are questioning, do I keep that one? Do I get rid? Keep, lose, keep, lose. And there's this constant keep, lose dynamic going on, which again, you can go with keep, lose and think old, new. So we've got that approaching Saturn Uranus square, which again, we haven't mentioned till however long. I think we've been going nearly an hour already.
In other words, you have to keep loose and, carry on.
Yeah, there's that constant, right. Is there anything else you want to draw from this chart?
Well, I like where we've come so far with it, and I think that it's a very positive full moon overall. Again, good for rituals. It's trying to Jupiter, supporting everything that you like to do. The ones that are probably going to feel this as a little more perhaps challenging could be the cardinal signs, but simply because they are in this pivotal moment for them, because Venus is stationing retrograde in the angles. So that should be like an aha moment for them, where they are made abruptly conscious of uncomfortable truths for them, because that axis of the full moon is happening on the 6th and 12th for Capricorns and Cancer risings. And it's going to happen for Aries and Libra risings in the 9th and 3rd houses, which is less rude of an awakening. But yeah, it's going to be much more enjoyable for the Libra and Aries risings, I would suppose, even though they have that Venus and Mars dynamic also being very important and tied into it.
Thanks,
very intimately. Sorry?
Thanks for that.
Yeah, that might be more enjoyable for you guys, even though it's abrupt, even though it seems to be the harsher, I think, because it feels a little bit more unstable. With the fixed signs, I think they're good. Jupiter is moving into Pisces, getting out of the 1st house, leaving them, to deal with the restructuring that they already know they're going to have to do in the long term. So it's nothing too new for them. It's just a moving forward with something. And the retrograde Venus is a much more of a getting used to the plan in the long term. The mutable signs are probably going to be the ones most affected by this full moon, in the sense that they are going to be more active. I think they are going to be finalizing things and coming into philosophically important awarenesses that are going to impact how they view their long-term processes. For cardinal signs, that's a bit different. It's like much more yeah, it's much more about the things that you enjoy, rather than for the mutable signs. It's much more about who you are, perhaps, you know, like it's a much more fundamental kind of change, I would say, for the mutables than for the cardinals. The cardinals is just a different way of doing things. For the fixed signs, I wouldn't say that much is going to change, just the path is going to become clearer and safer, perhaps, from their perspective.
That's actually really quite interesting. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, released her video about the full moon this morning, which I watched. And I noticed she'd pulled out some of the themes that I'd already pulled out with the asteroids and septiles and stuff, and she was getting it from Neptune. One interesting phrase that I either pulled out of her video or I deduced from what she was saying with what I'd looked at was, there's an element of sit down, shut up and watch. Because there's all these feelings getting stirred up, and there is, I can't remember now what Phaethon is doing, but Phaethon is doing something with Mars that makes it, you can try to overachieve, whereas, yeah, feel the anger, express the anger, but be aware that everybody else is doing the same.
Yes.
So that's where what we were saying about Mars, the being aggressive. Everyone's in the same space that you are. So there is an element of acting on your feelings, yes, but there's also make sure part of you, at least, is sitting down, shutting up and watching all that's going on, so that you can really notice where to, I don't want to use the phrase take advantage, but have the ability to build constructively.
Yeah, I would say that we have to mind our water in this time, because we are not going to feel that it's being respected. And by that, I mean, planets are in masculine signs. There's Capricorn, there's Aquarius, there is Gemini and Sag. These are all active signs except for Capricorn, but Capricorn is Earth. There's no water in the sky right now. There's fire, earth, and air. Except for Neptune, I know, but I'm talking about the inner planets, or the ones that are visible. And that, to me, indicates that we have to be mindful and make an effort to act in behalf of our water, and consciously try to bring our water to the surface, meaning water is a more inactive, again, shut up and listen kind of element, because it's a mute element. And it allows things to be fertilized. It's the most fertile element, followed by earth and then air, and then, I mean, followed by earth and then fire and then air, as the least fertile of the elements, or barren elements. And you have, therefore, that necessity of making yourself more aware. So in situations where you feel you're being too hot-headed, where the fire seems to be coming up, in situations where the air seems to be uncontrolled, meaning anxiety is running wild in your head and you're making up all these scenarios that things could go wrong, where things could go wrong. And if you remember to do the water, meaning if you remember to just shut everything out and be with your feelings, let them through, let them flow, and not keep the water stuck, in other words, you're going to be able to work with the current energy much better than you otherwise would if you just keep too focused on the active side of these planets, where these planets are trying to grab your attention to.
Allowing the feelings to flow is really useful, because something creative is going to come out of it. Moon by quintile, the 12th part of Venus. So there's, was it within 2 degrees, I think? Oh no, 4 degrees, but still not far off. just there's also that element of make sure that you are listening to the feelings and allowing them to pass, not taking advice from the feelings, but listening to them, because there's many things that will be said in truth under this moon that might not necessarily be believed at first go. So we are starting this, as much as this is, I was thinking earlier, this is almost like a final last gasp of that Gemini Sagittarius eclipse thing, considering it's the next successive moon. But it feels much more like a beginning or a Page of Pentacles moment. Level 1 complete, level 2 is the start now, because there is this fertile ground. That reminds me, talking of the Page of Pentacles, because considering that I am a tarot reading channel, and I've noticed a lot of the other, oh, okay, we've got one fallout already. I was going to pull a card for the moon, where it's just shot out already, and we have the very helpful Seven of Cups. So there's going to be a lot to take on board and a lot to look at. But also remember, in some of these decks, I sometimes liken the Seven of Cups to that fairy tale distant land. You know, like if you're not necessarily out in the country, but it's always better when you're out in the countryside, and you see those certain clouds that they look like, yeah, they've got cities built on them and they've got people that live up there. Most definitely, they look real, they look solid. You don't think that they're water vapor. There's a sort of like a fae or fairy favor illusion of a solid ground. We've got that sort of promise ahead of us if we can choose the right ones. And that's what I really like. And I don't think I think that there's more than one option. You're not going through this moon just to do one thing. You're going through this moon to do 3 or 4 things, at least, to get to that promised land, that cloud city, whatever. Yes, cloud city moon, that's what we could call the video. Have you got any ideas to what to call this moon for the video title?
No, I like Cloud City. I like it.
I've either got that or the gods are screaming, you know.
The gods are screaming, also good. But no, maybe that gives the wrong impression. But yeah, I like where we got with this full moon. I think it's a very positive full moon. I don't generally have that many positive things to talk about, but they're not being harmed by the malefics in any way, and they are very focused on the larger narrative in our lives, trying to define what all the next steps are going to be. Just remember, as we were saying just now, to be grounded, to let yourself listen, to let yourself relax, let your waters flow. As the Seven of Cups came out, what Dee was saying about there is this kind of promise if we only know which one to choose or which ones to choose from. And I think that the sevens, they have this conflictuous energy to them that allows for us to understand that sometimes the best course of action is to just be receptive to what's being given to you in order. It's like using your opponent's weight against them. So if someone attacks you, sometimes it's better to just stand still until they get close enough that you can do that one fluid motion that just throws their weight against them, and then you knock them over without making that much effort. This is kind of that kind of energy of the sevens. So the listening part is incredibly important, not because you're going to be inactive, but because you need to make yourself a little bit more conscious about that water side in order to listen to which path is singing to you the loudest or the most in tune to your soul.
Right. So if you want to get rid of the screen share.
Right. Forgot about that all along.
What are you up to at the moment? What have you got going on? You're still tutoring?
Yeah, still keeping up with my tutoring sessions. For anyone who's interested, you can contact me on my page on Instagram, Facebook, on my website. All of them are going to have either direct messages or an email option for you to contact me. And we can schedule a reading or a tutoring sessions. My services are also available on my website in the services page. So all the links are probably going to be here by the end of the video, I suppose.
They're also going to be in the description down below. And I can say, as a personal recipient of David's tutoring, it is well worth it, and of the readings. In terms of my readings, as I said in the Eclipse video that we did a couple of weeks ago, I'm still very, very busy with my day job, unfortunately. So there's not going to be a lot of videos that will come out, and plus Christmas, hey, is coming. So that's going to use up some time. I'm not entirely sure we can even commit to the next new moon, to be quite honest, with the crazy season being here. But nonetheless, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, whether you're on YouTube, Vimeo, Odyssey, BitChute, whichever. I am available still for, in a limited fashion, for personal readings, but that would be tarot, not astrology, because, as I said, David tutors me. I'm still a student.
Aren't we all? And I'd like to say, make sure you leave a comment with how you're dealing with this new moon, because with this full moon, because it's always interesting for us to see how the feedback of what we've been putting out there, how that has been reflecting, and helps people understand as well how these energies play out individually, helps people learn, and etc. So if you'd like to help us out like that, it would be fun.
So be kind to one another. Remember that everybody's going through it. You know, whatever it is that gets you goat and that you're going about, because this is a perfect moon for doing that. Just remember, everybody else is doing exactly the same. So maybe we can use this energy this time. So that's it, really, isn't it? Should we call this to a close?
That's it.
Yeah. Good luck, everybody. Have a fantastic midwinter festival, however you choose to celebrate it, and we will see you in the new year. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.